English talking practice. Lena often dreamed of speaking English fluently, effortlessly, like a native. Yet, the moment she opened her mouth, a heavy wave of dread washed over her. She wanted to practice, to truly engage, but the invisible shackles of perfectionism held her captive. Every single word felt like a potential trap, a public announcement of her perceived inadequacy. English talking practice, she would whisper to herself, staring at her reflection. How to talk in English? The questions echoed in her quiet room, unanswered, leaving her feeling even more frustrated. She consumed countless articles and videos, searching for the magical key. It seemed everyone else knew some secret she was missing entirely. The advice always sounded so simple. How to learn English, they'd say. Start step by step talking. But what did that truly mean for someone whose heart pounded at the mere thought of forming a sentence? Each piece of advice felt like a giant leap, not a small, manageable step. Her confidence was perpetually low. She remembered a popular video's encouraging title, "Let Me Tell You Talking Tips." Lena clicked on it, hopeful. The speaker was vibrant, enthusiastic, promising to unlock her hidden potential. She listened intently, scribbling notes, convinced this time would be different, that she would finally conquer this immense challenge. I don't want to make mistakes, but I always why? This was her constant lament, a recurring nightmare. She understood grammar rules, knew vocabulary, but the fear of mispronouncing a word or using the wrong tense froze her. It was a mental block, a self-imposed prison of silence, incredibly debilitating. The speaker emphasized, listen and practice. This seemed logical enough. Lena immersed herself in podcasts, movies, and English songs. She repeated phrases, trying to mimic the intonation. Yet, when it came to spontaneous conversation, her mind still went blank, the words dissolving into thin air. Then came the intriguing suggestion, how to talk at home to yourself. Lena felt a blush creep up her neck just thinking about it. Talking to an empty room seemed utterly ridiculous, almost childish. Would it even help? Would she just reinforce her own errors without any external correction or guidance? She tried it anyway, tentatively. Standing in front of her mirror, she began describing her day. Today I woke up, she corrected herself, a small victory. It felt awkward, undeniably silly, but also, surprisingly, a little bit liberating in its utter privacy. No one was judging her. Days turned into weeks, filled with these solo practice sessions. Lena described objects, narrated her actions, even argued with imaginary people in English. She started noticing patterns in her errors, areas where she consistently stumbled. The self-correction process was slow but steady, building a fragile foundation. One evening, while scrolling, she stumbled upon a controversial headline, "Why You Should Not Learn English." Her eyebrows shot up. This was counterintuitive, almost scandalous. Every piece of advice she had ever encountered screamed the opposite message. Curiosity compelled her to click and read further. The article argued that if your sole motivation was perfection, if the fear of mistakes crippled you, then perhaps you shouldn't. It wasn't about giving up, but about reframing the purpose. English wasn't about flawlessness, but about communication, connection, and embracing the journey of lifelong learning and growth. This perspective hit Lena like a lightning bolt. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about being brave. It was about allowing herself to be vulnerable, to stumble, to learn from every misstep. The article didn't discourage learning. It encouraged a healthier, more realistic mindset towards the process itself. How to practice English? The question now held a different weight. It wasn't just about repetition. It was about application, about letting go of the internal censor. She realized that her biggest obstacle wasn't the language itself, but her own paralyzing fear, her desperate need for absolute perfection. She started small. During her morning coffee ritual, she would narrate her actions silently in English. I pour coffee. I add milk. It is a good morning. These simple sentences, previously avoided, now flowed a little more freely in her mind, building a quiet confidence. The fear of making mistakes had been a heavy blanket, smothering her voice. She began to see that everyone, even native speakers, made errors. It was part of human communication, a natural part of expressing thoughts and feelings. Her relentless self-criticism was far more damaging than any grammatical slip-up. One afternoon, while browsing a local bookstore, she overheard a tourist asking for directions. The tourist seemed a little lost, fumbling for words. Lena's instinct was to help, but her old fear instantly resurfaced, a familiar tightness in her chest, a silent alarm bell. Then she remembered the article, the idea of reframing purpose. It wasn't about speaking flawlessly, it was about helping. Her fear suddenly seemed selfish compared to the tourist's need. She took a deep breath, pushing down the familiar wave of anxiety, and slowly approached the stranger. "Excuse me," Lena began, her voice a little shaky. "Do you need some help?" The words felt clumsy and imperfect, but they were out. The tourist looked up, relieved, a smile spreading across his face, instantly easing some of Lena's lingering apprehension and self-doubt. He explained his predicament, and Lena, focusing on understanding rather than perfect grammar, managed to give him clear directions. She used simple sentences, gesturing when words eluded her. She stumbled on a preposition, but the tourist didn't even seem to notice, just thanked her profusely. That small interaction was a monumental turning point. She hadn't been perfect, far from it. Yet, she had communicated effectively. She had helped someone. The world hadn't ended, no one had laughed, and the sun continued to shine. It was a revelation, a profound shift in perspective. From that day forward, Lena actively sought out opportunities to speak. She joined an online language exchange group, forcing herself into conversations. Her initial interactions were still awkward, riddled with pauses and corrections, but the fear was slowly, steadily dissipating with each attempt. She embraced the start step-by-step talking philosophy with renewed vigor. Her steps were small, sometimes just a single sentence, then two, then a short paragraph. She celebrated these tiny victories, no longer waiting for grand, fluent pronouncements. Each word spoken was a triumph. The advice, "Let me tell you talking tips," now resonated differently. The best tip wasn't a technique, it was the courage to try, the willingness to be imperfect. It was the understanding that mistakes were not failures, but stepping stones on the path to fluency, essential for growth. I don't want to make mistakes, but I always why? The questions still surfaced occasionally, a ghost of her former self. But now she had an answer, because mistakes are how I learn. Because mistakes show me where to improve. Because mistakes mean I am trying. Her daily ritual of listen and practice transformed. She listened not just for words, but for confidence, for the natural flow of conversation. Her practice became more intentional, focused on areas she identified as challenging during her real-life interactions, rather than abstract exercises. How to talk at home to yourself became her sanctuary, a safe space to experiment without pressure. She rehearsed conversations, practiced difficult pronunciations, and even gave imagined speeches. It was her private laboratory, where language could be played with and mastered without fear. The controversial article, "Why You Should Not Learn English," became her secret mantra. She didn't learn English to be perfect. She learned it to connect, to explore, to grow. She learned it to overcome her fear, not to avoid it, embracing the imperfect beauty of communication. How to practice English evolved into a joyous journey, not a daunting task. She found a study buddy, watched English documentaries, and even started writing short stories in English, challenging herself creatively and expanding her vocabulary in new and exciting ways. Lena understood now that fluency wasn't about speaking without errors. It was about speaking despite them. It was about the courage to engage, the resilience to learn, and the joy of expressing herself in a new tongue, opening up a world of possibilities she once only dreamed of. Her voice grew stronger, her words flowed more smoothly. She still made mistakes, of course, but they no longer held her captive. They were just momentary stumbles, quickly recovered from, often leading to a small laugh or a quick self-correction, part of the natural rhythm of dialogue. The initial question, how to talk in English, had finally found its answer within her own journey. It wasn't a singular technique, but a holistic approach, a blend of self-practice, external interaction, and, most importantly, a profound shift in mindset regarding perfection and progress. She often thought about those early days, the overwhelming anxiety, the constant internal battle. It felt like a lifetime ago, a different person entirely. The transformation wasn't sudden, but a gradual accumulation of brave moments, of pushing past discomfort. Every new word she learned, every new phrase she mastered, added another brick to her linguistic fortress. Her confidence wasn't a given, it was built meticulously, piece by piece, through consistent effort and a steadfast refusal to succumb to her former fears. The freedom she now felt in expressing herself was exhilarating. English was no longer a barrier but a bridge, connecting her to people, cultures, and ideas previously inaccessible. It opened doors to new friendships and broadened her entire understanding of the world. She sometimes shared her story with others struggling with language learning, offering genuine encouragement. Don't focus on not making mistakes, she'd advise them gently. Focus on making progress, however small. Each attempt is a win, regardless of perfection. Her advice often mirrored the tips she herself had found useful. Start step by step talking. Emphasizing tiny, manageable goals, celebrating every minor achievement. It wasn't about running a marathon instantly, but about taking that first hesitant step forward. Let me tell you talking tips, she'd start, a warm smile on her face. The most important tip is to just open your mouth. The second is to keep it open. Consistency beats perfection every single time in language acquisition. She understood the pain of, I don't want to make mistakes, but I always why. It was a universal feeling for language learners. Her secret was accepting that why was part of the process, a sign of active learning, not a mark of failure. She stressed the importance of listen and practice. Active listening, not passive consumption, and deliberate practice, not just going through the motions. Engaging with the language, truly absorbing its nuances, and then trying to replicate them. How to talk at home to yourself remained a cornerstone of her routine. It provided a safe, judgment-free zone to experiment with new vocabulary, to practice tricky sentences, and to build muscle memory in her tongue and brain without pressure. The article, Why You Should Not Learn English, became a paradox she embraced. It taught her that learning English wasn't about avoiding mistakes, but about seeking connection. If you only learned to be perfect, you'd never speak. True learning lay in the courage to be imperfect. How to practice English became about integrating it into her daily life. Reading English news, watching English vlogs, even thinking her thoughts in English whenever possible. It wasn't a separate task, but a continuous, flowing part of her existence. Her journey was a testament to patience and perseverance. It was a reminder that transformation often occurred incrementally, through countless small efforts, rather than a single grand breakthrough. Each small step accumulated into significant progress over time. Lena realized that the ability to communicate, even imperfectly, was far more valuable than perfect grammar. Communication fostered understanding, built bridges, and unlocked opportunities that meticulous correctness alone could never provide. She often reflected on the initial fear that had held her captive. It was a powerful, insidious force. But by confronting it, by making the conscious choice to speak despite the apprehension, she had not only learned a language but also grown as a person. Her English journey became a metaphor for life itself. Challenges weren't meant to be avoided but faced head-on. Mistakes weren't failures but lessons. And true growth came from stepping outside the comfort zone, daring to be vulnerable and learn. The joy she now experienced when engaging in a lively English conversation was immeasurable. It was a profound sense of accomplishment, a personal victory over self-doubt and the restrictive fear of judgment that had once loomed so large. She understood that learning a language was a marathon, not a sprint. There would be good days and bad days, moments of rapid progress and plateaus. But the key was to keep moving forward consistently, even if the pace seemed slow. Her journey proved that the answer to how to talk in English was simple yet profound. Just talk. Start small, be consistent, accept your imperfections, and celebrate every single effort. The journey itself was the most valuable lesson learned. And so, Lena, once paralyzed by fear, now spoke with newfound confidence. Her voice, once silenced by the pursuit of perfection, now resonated with the vibrant melody of genuine communication, a testament to her courage and persistent effort.